3 drops. That's all it took to reveal who my mother-in-law really was. I was adjusting my veil in the reflection of the copper backsplash I'd spent 3 months restoring by hand. The metal was polished to a mirror finish, and that's the only reason I caught her. Victoria was standing directly behind me, her eyes fixed on my champagne glass sitting on the bar. She didn't see my face in the copper. She just saw opportunity. I watched her pull a small glass vial from her beaded clutch. Her manicured fingers moved with practiced efficiency as she tilted it over my drink. 1 drop, 2, 3. The liquid was clear, dissolving instantly into the golden champagne. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I could feel my pulse in my teeth. But I didn't turn around. I didn't scream. I stood perfectly still, watching her tuck the vial away and smooth down her silver gown like she'd just checked her lipstick. She walked toward a senator's wife with that pageant queen smile she'd perfected over 60 years. Then, with hands steadier than they had any right to be, I reached out and switched our glasses. Her poison was now in her hand. And the real wedding drama was about to begin. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. My name is Meredith. I'm 34 and a restoration architect. This is the story of how I let my mother-in-law destroy herself with her own weapon. Most brides would be hyperventilating in the bathroom after watching their new mother-in-law try to drug them. But I deal with crumbling foundations and structural failures for a living. I've stood in buildings that were actively trying to collapse. Panic is a luxury I can't afford when a ceiling is sagging 6 inches above code. What I felt in that moment wasn't fear. It was static load. That's the engineering term for the immense silent weight a beam carries right before it either holds the roof up or snaps clean in half. I walked back to the head table, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor. I checked my pulse against my wrist, a habit from too many high-stress site inspections. 82 beats per minute, elevated but controlled. I smoothed the silk of my dress and sat down next to Connor. My husband squeezed my hand under the table, his surgeon's fingers warm against my cold skin. He looked at me with so much love, it made my chest ache. "You look beautiful," he whispered. He had no idea that 10 feet away, his mother was sipping champagne she'd intended for my destruction. I looked across the table. Victoria was holding court with my parents, laughing at something my father said, playing the benevolent matriarch with Oscar-worthy precision. She turned and caught my eye. The smile never wavered, but something behind it went flat and dead. She raised her glass toward me in a silent toast, just a little smirk, a look that said, "Checkmate, darling." She thought she was the architect of this moment. She thought I was just some lucky girl who'd stumbled into her dynasty, a problem to be solved with a checkbook or a few drops of clear liquid. I picked up my water glass. My hand was completely steady. The water was cold. It tasted like clarity. I watched Victoria take another long sip of the champagne. The thing about Victoria is that she'd spent 2 years trying to demolish me. From the moment Connor introduced us, I was a zoning violation in her perfectly curated world. The Ashfords are what people call old money, which usually just means they're terrified of anyone who actually works for a living. I met Victoria at the estate inspection. I was wearing work boots and a hard hat dusted with drywall. She looked at my calloused hands like they were contagious. "Connor, are you hiring help for some remodeling?" she'd asked, looking right through me. When he told her I was his girlfriend, her face didn't change at all. She just said, "Oh." The insults were never loud after that. They were structural, small cracks in the foundation designed to make me collapse from the inside. She would forget to invite me to family dinners. She'd introduce me to their friends as Connor's little project manager, ignoring my master's degree and my license. But 6 months ago, she showed me exactly who she was. I was sitting in her library when she slid a cream-colored envelope across the mahogany desk. Inside was a cashier's check for $100,000. "Think of it as a severance package," she said, her voice honey smooth. "You're a lovely girl, Meredith, but let's be realistic. You build things. We own things. You'll never be comfortable at this table, and I'm just trying to save you the embarrassment of trying." The check was more money than my parents made in 2 years. I slid it back across the desk without breaking eye contact. "I think you're underestimating the cost of labor, Victoria. I'm not for sale." That's when her expression changed. That's when I stopped being a nuisance and became a threat. The week before the wedding was what psychologists call an extinction burst. It's what happens when a toddler realizes screaming isn't working, so they scream louder, break things, escalate to a frantic peak right before they finally give up. Victoria went scorched earth. On Tuesday, she called our florist and tried to cancel the order by claiming the bride had died in a car accident. The florist called me first. On Thursday, I found her inspecting my veil in the bridal suite. When she left, there was a jagged tear through the French lace. She claimed her ring caught it, but I know the tensile strength of French lace. You have to want to rip it. I fixed it with gold thread, a technique I use in restoration work. I didn't tell Connor. I knew if I did, Victoria would spin it. She'd gaslight him, call me paranoid, say I was stressed and imagining things. She relied on the fact that her behavior was so insane, no rational person would believe it. So when I saw the vial at the reception, everything clicked into place. This wasn't random. This wasn't just hatred. This was the final detonation of her extinction burst. She couldn't stop the wedding, so she decided to ruin the memory of it. She wanted me sick, humiliated, vomiting in front of 200 of the city's elite. She wanted proof that I was weak, messy, unworthy of the Ashford name. She wanted a disaster. I just decided to let her be the victim of it. The reception hall quieted as the string quartet faded and Connor stood to give his toast. He was charming, self-deprecating, everything a groom should be. He called me the strongest person he'd ever met. He said marrying me was like finding a load-bearing wall in a house he thought was falling down. The guests laughed. I pressed my palm flat against my thigh to stop the trembling that had finally started. Connor sat down and kissed my cheek. "I'm the luckiest man alive," he whispered. Then a spoon tapped Crystal, and the room went quiet again. Victoria rose from her seat like she was ascending a throne. She held the champagne flute with the gold rim high in the air, and my stomach clenched into a fist. "Marriage," she began, projecting with that finishing school cadence she'd perfected, "is about partnership. It's about knowing who you are and where you come from." A few of her friends at table 4 nodded approvingly. "And most importantly," she continued, turning her gaze directly to me, "it's about trust. Knowing that the person sitting next to you has your best interests at heart." She locked eyes with me on the word trust. I didn't blink. I raised my water glass in return. "To the happy couple," Victoria said. She tipped the flute back. One long, elegant swallow, then another. She drained it completely. For a moment, nothing happened. She sat down looking triumphant, turning to my father to discuss his golf handicap. I sat perfectly still, counting seconds like a metronome. At 2 minutes and 12 seconds, I noticed her hand drift to her throat. At 2 minutes and 38 seconds, her foundation-covered face turned a violent shade of gray. At 2 minutes and 51 seconds, Victoria tried to stand. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the tablecloth to steady herself, pulling a centerpiece of white lilies down with her. Crystal shattered. Water pooled across the silk runner. Then biology did what chemistry demanded. It wasn't a polite swoon. It was violent, ugly, undeniable. Victoria retched, a guttural sound that silenced the string quartet mid-note. She vomited directly onto the head table, across the china, the silk, the skirt of her custom Valentino gown. The smell hit us immediately. Acid and champagne and expensive perfume. The woman who'd spent 60 years building an image of untouchable perfection was heaving on the floor in front of 200 witnesses. "Mom!" Connor shouted, launching from his chair. "Mom, can you hear me?" He was on the floor beside her, surgeon's training taking over. He shouted commands. "Pulse thready, pupils dilated, airway clear, someone call 911. I stood up slowly. While the guests screamed and crowded around, I walked to the DJ and told him to cut the music. I directed the coordinator to clear a path for the paramedics. My voice was calm. My hands were steady. The paramedics arrived in 4 minutes. They loaded Victoria onto the stretcher while she moaned something incoherent about ungrateful children and gold diggers. As they lifted her, her beaded clutch slid from her lap and hit the floor. The clasp snapped open. Contents scattered across the hardwood. A lipstick, a compact mirror, and a small empty glass vial with a pharmacy label still attached. ipecac syrup and diazepam, the handwriting unmistakably from the Ashford family's private physician. Connor later confirmed he recognized the specific substances immediately. Connor saw it. He went absolutely still. But that wasn't the smoking gun. Next to the vial was a piece of cream-colored stationery, folded into a neat square. I recognized the paper immediately. It was the same stock as the envelope that had held the $100,000 bribe. I picked it up and unfolded it. The handwriting was Victoria's, elegant looping script. Ladies and gentlemen, I must apologize for the interruption. My new daughter-in-law has struggled for years with personal demons. We hoped the stress of the wedding wouldn't trigger a relapse, but it seems the alcohol was too much. Please forgive the mess. We'll get her the help she needs. It was a speech she'd written before the reception started. She hadn't just planned to make me sick. She'd planned the narrative of my destruction. She was going to take the microphone while I was incapacitated and frame her crime as my mental breakdown. I walked over to Connor. He was staring at the empty vial, his face bloodless. "Connor," I said quietly, "read this." He took the paper. I watched his eyes move across the words, once, then again, then a third time, like his brain couldn't process what he was seeing. I've watched a lot of things collapse in my career. Buildings, bridges, renovation budgets. But I'd never seen a relationship collapse until that moment. Something died in Connor's face. The concern, the panic, the lifelong assumption that his mother loved him in a way that was healthy and real. All of it just went out, like someone had flipped a breaker. He looked at the note. He looked at the vial. He looked at the stretcher being wheeled toward the ambulance. "She wrote this before," he said. His voice sounded like grinding metal. "She planned this. She planned to poison you and then destroy your reputation while you were defenseless." "Yes." He folded the note and put it in his pocket. Then he walked to the paramedic with a stride I'd never seen before. Cold, surgical, final. "She didn't have a stroke," Connor told him. "She ingested an emetic and a sedative. Check her bag for the vial and call the police." 40 minutes later, we walked through the sliding doors of St. Catherine's Hospital, still in our wedding clothes. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and ruined expectations. Victoria was stabilized in a private room, the drugs flushed from her system, but the legal catastrophe was just beginning. Detective Reyes was waiting in the hallway, a woman who looked like she'd seen enough family dysfunction to write a dissertation on it. I pulled up the file on my phone. Because I'd restored the Ashford estate, I knew exactly where the security cameras were positioned, and I'd kept my remote access credentials to the system for warranty follow-ups. I'd had the footage in my inbox before the ambulance reached the hospital. I showed the detective the video. Timestamp 6:47 p.m. Victoria looks around, pulls the vial, tips 3 drops into the glass. It was high-definition proof of a felony. Connor walked out of Victoria's room. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. His tuxedo was wrinkled, his bow tie hanging loose, and there was something hollow behind his eyes that hadn't been there at the altar. He walked past his father, who was sitting with his head in his hands, and went straight to the detective. "My mother is awake," he said. His voice was clinical, detached. "She wants to make a statement." "Did she confess?" Connor laughed. It was the saddest sound I'd ever heard him make. "No. She told me she did it to save me. She said you were a gold digger ruining the Ashford bloodline." He looked at me. "She said I'd thank her one day." The detective waited. Connor reached into his pocket and pulled out the cream-colored stationery, the pre-written speech, the evidence of premeditation. "My mother didn't just try to poison my wife," he said, handing it over. "She planned a character assassination. She wrote this before the ceremony started. This proves intent." His father stood up. "Connor, don't. She's your mother." Connor turned to face him. The look in his eyes made the older man step back. "She's a criminal," Connor said, "and if you pay for her lawyer, you're choosing her over me. That's a choice you don't get to take back." He turned to the detective. "I'm pressing charges, and I'm requesting an immediate restraining order for myself and my wife." I watched him sign the paperwork. His hand didn't shake, his jaw didn't tremble. It was the most romantic thing I'd ever witnessed. He didn't just choose me. He surgically removed the person who'd been poisoning our lives for years. No hesitation, no negotiation, just the quiet scratch of pen on paper, finalizing the divorce between a son and his toxic origin. That was 13 months ago. Victoria is currently serving a 24-month sentence for aggravated assault and reckless endangerment. Her lawyer tried to argue diminished capacity, but the pre-written speech destroyed that defense. You can't claim temporary insanity when you drafted a press release about it 3 days in advance. The restraining order was granted within 72 hours, and we haven't seen or spoken to her since sentencing. Connor's father made his choice that night in the hospital. He paid for Victoria's defense attorney, a decision Connor predicted and accepted with the same surgical detachment he'd shown when signing the police report. We exchange Christmas cards with him now, polite and distant, but Connor says that's more than he expected. Some foundations can't be repaired, only acknowledged. Connor and I didn't move into the Ashford estate. We bought a fixer-upper on the other side of the city. It's a 1920s craftsman with original hardwood floors and a foundation that needs work. Just like us. Right now, I'm sitting at our kitchen table, repairing a ceramic bowl I broke last week. I'm using a Japanese technique called kintsugi. You don't hide the cracks. You fill them with lacquer mixed with powdered gold. The philosophy is that the piece becomes more beautiful for having been broken. The fracture is where the strength lives. For a long time, I thought a perfect marriage meant no conflict. Smooth surfaces, easy days. But Victoria taught me something valuable. She tried to shatter us. She tried to find our stress points and hammer them until we crumbled. But she miscalculated the materials. When we sat in that hospital waiting room, watching the police lead her away in handcuffs, Connor and I didn't fall apart. We fused. The trauma didn't leave a scar. It left a seam of gold. We trust each other with a depth most couples never reach because they're never tested like this. I know with absolute certainty that he will choose me. And he knows that I will see the threats he's blind to. I finish the bowl. The gold lines catch the afternoon light, shining brighter than the original ceramic ever did. It's imperfect, it's jagged, and it's unbreakable. If you believe that toxic family members don't deserve a seat at your table, hit that like button and share this story. And tell me in the comments, what's the worst thing a relative has ever done at a wedding you attended? Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.